Some wounds are carved so deep, even moonlight cannot reach them. The snow fell in silence, thick and relentless, burying the world beneath a shroud of white indifference. Ilara knelt at the edge of the forest, her knees pressed into the frozen earth, her breath a brittle fog that disappeared into the dark. Blood stained the snow around her, not hers, but close enough to feel like it belonged to her. They had cast her out at dawn, no trial, no mercy, just the Alpha's cold pronouncement. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. She had not begged. She had not wept. She had simply turned and walked into the trees, her wolf silent within her chest, curled into a knot of shame and grief. Now, hours later, the cold had settled into her bones. Her thin cloak offered no warmth. Her bare feet had gone numb. She should have died already. Part of her wanted to, but something deeper, older, refused to let go. The wind howled through the pines, carrying with it the scent of iron and smoke. Ilara lifted her head, her senses sharpening despite her exhaustion. Somewhere nearby, someone was dying. She rose on trembling legs and followed the scent deeper into the forest. The trees closed around her like sentinels, their branches heavy with snow. The moon hung low and full above the canopy, casting silver light through the skeletal limbs. Then she saw him. A man lay sprawled in the snow, his armor dented and scorched, his dark hair matted with blood. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. Around him, the snow was churned and stained, evidence of a brutal fight. 3 bodies lay nearby, their throats torn open, their eyes glassy and frozen. Ilara should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to let the forest claim him as it would soon claim her. But she knelt beside him instead. His eyes opened, golden, fierce, and filled with something she recognized too well, the weight of a life spent carrying others. He tried to speak, but only a rasp emerged. His hand moved weakly toward the hilt of a blade still clutched in his grip. "I'm not here to kill you," Ilara whispered. Her voice was hoarse, unused. "I'm here because you're dying." His gaze held hers for a long moment. Then, inexplicably, he let the blade fall. She pressed her hands to the gaping wound in his side, feeling the heat of his blood against her frozen fingers. Her wolf stirred, just barely, a flicker of instinct she thought had been extinguished. She closed her eyes and let it guide her. The forest held its breath. Something ancient moved through her veins, not power, not magic, but something older than both. Her hands grew warm. The bleeding slowed. The man's breathing steadied. When she opened her eyes again, he was staring at her with an expression she could not name. "Who are you?" he rasped. "No one," she said. "Just someone the world forgot." He reached up, his bloodied hand closing gently around her wrist. His grip was firm despite his weakness. Liar. The word hung between them like a promise. Ilara pulled away and stood, swaying slightly. "You'll live. That's all I can give you." She turned to leave, but his voice followed her through the trees. "Wait." She did not stop. Behind her, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories tried to rise, tried to call out again, but the darkness took him before he could speak her name, a name he did not yet know, but would spend the rest of his life learning. Ilara returned to the hollow tree where she had planned to wait for death. She curled into its rotted interior, pulling her cloak tight around her shoulders, and tried not to think about golden eyes or the warmth of blood beneath her palms. Sleep came in fragments, broken by cold and hunger and the ghost of a voice asking, "Who are you?" When dawn broke, Pale and gray, she ventured back toward the clearing. She told herself it was only to see if he had survived. She told herself she owed him nothing. But when she reached the place where he had fallen, the bodies were gone. The snow had been disturbed, trampled by many feet. A trail of blood led north toward the mountains. He had been taken. Alara stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the crimson path cutting through the white. She should have felt relieved. She should have walked away. Instead, she followed. The trail led her deeper into the wilderness, through narrow ravines and over icy ridges. Hours passed. Her feet bled. Her lungs burned. But she did not stop. By midday, she saw them. A group of men moved through the valley below, carrying the wounded man on a makeshift stretcher. They wore armor marked with the sigil of the Northern Crown, a wolf's head crowned in silver. Soldiers, loyal ones. Alara crouched behind a boulder, watching. The man, the Alpha King, she realized now, was unconscious, his face pale and slack. The soldiers moved with grim efficiency, their expressions hard. One of them spoke, his voice carrying on the wind. "We should have reached the fortress by now. He's losing too much blood." "He'll make it," another replied. "He always does." But the doubt in his tone was unmistakable. Alara pulled back, her heart hammering. She had done what she could. He would live or he would not. It was no longer her burden. Yet as she turned to leave, a voice cut through the air, sharp, commanding, and achingly familiar. "Stop." The soldiers froze. Ilara's breath caught. The Alpha King had opened his eyes. He was staring directly at the ridge where she hid, his gaze unwavering despite the distance. "There!" he rasped, lifting one hand to point. "Bring her to me." The soldiers exchanged confused glances. One of them climbed the ridge, scanning the rocks. Alara pressed herself against the stone, praying the shadows would hide her, but the soldier's eyes locked onto hers. "Found her, my lord." Alara ran. She bolted across the ridge, her feet slipping on ice and stone. Behind her, she heard shouts, the clatter of armor, the pounding of boots. She did not get far. A hand closed around her arm, yanking her backward. She twisted, snarling, her wolf rising to the surface for the first time in weeks. But the soldier was stronger, and within moments she was pinned. They dragged her down the ridge and threw her to her knees before the stretcher. The Alpha King looked at her with those golden eyes, clearer now, sharper. "You saved my life." "I shouldn't have," Alara spat. A faint smile touched his lips. Probably not. One of the soldiers stepped forward, his hand on his sword. "My lord, she could be a spy. We should—" "No." The king's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "She comes with us. My lord." "That," he said, his gaze never leaving Alara's face, "is an order." The soldiers fell silent. Alara stared at him, her chest heaving. "I don't want your protection." "I don't care what you want," he replied. "You're coming anyway." And as they lifted his stretcher and began the march north, Alara found herself pulled along, a prisoner, a savior, and something she could not yet name. The fortress rose from the mountain like a beast of stone and ice. Its walls were black granite, its towers sharp as claws against the gray sky. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the battlements in white. Alara was brought through the gates in chains. The soldiers had bound her wrists, despite the king's protests. "Precaution," they said. She did not fight. She had no strength left. Inside, the fortress was a maze of corridors and staircases. lit by torches that cast flickering shadows on the walls. Servants and guards moved through the halls, their faces hard and wary. Whispers followed Alara wherever she went. Omega, exile, witch. She kept her head down and said nothing. They brought her to a chamber high in the eastern tower. It was small but warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth and furs piled on the narrow bed. A tray of food sat on the table: bread, dried meat, wine. "Rest," one of the soldiers said. "The king will send for you when he's ready." Then they left, locking the door behind them. Alara stood in the center of the room, staring at the flames. She should have felt trapped. She should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt curious. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. It had been days since she'd had a proper meal. The warmth of the fire seeped into her bones, easing the ache in her limbs. When she finished, she moved to the window and looked out over the mountains. The world below was endless white, beautiful and brutal. She pressed her palm to the cold glass and whispered, "What have you done, Alara?" The answer came 3 days later. The king summoned her to his chamber at dusk. She was escorted by 2 guards who said nothing, their expressions unreadable. The king's room was larger than hers, but no less austere. He sat in a chair by the fire, his torso wrapped in bandages, his face drawn but alert. When she entered, he dismissed the guards with a wave of his hand. They were alone. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Alara remained standing. "Why am I here?" "Because I asked you to be. That's not an answer." He smiled faintly. "No, it's not." Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Finally, he spoke. "You should be dead. Exiled Omegas don't survive the winter. Maybe I'm harder to kill than most. Or maybe," he said quietly, "you're something more." Alara's jaw tightened. "I'm nothing. Your soldiers made that very clear. They were wrong." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You don't even know me. I know you saved my life when you had every reason to let me die." He leaned forward, his golden eyes burning. "I know you have a gift, something rare, something the goddess herself must have placed in your hands." "I have nothing," Alara whispered. "I am nothing." "Then why?" he asked, his voice soft as falling snow. "Did the moon sing when you touched me?" Her breath caught. She had no answer. The king rose slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. He crossed the room and stopped before her, close enough that she could see the scar that ran along his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes. "Stay," he said, "not as a prisoner, as a guest, as something more, if you choose." "Why?" "Because I think," he said, "you're the answer to a question I've been asking for a very long time." Alara looked up at him, her heart pounding. "And what question is that?" He smiled, sad, hopeful, and achingly human. "How do you rebuild a kingdom when your hands are stained with blood?" And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. Alara did not leave. She told herself it was because she had nowhere else to go. She told herself it was because the fortress offered warmth and safety. She told herself it had nothing to do with golden eyes or questions that lingered in the air like smoke. But deep down, she knew the truth. She stayed because she wanted to. The days passed in a rhythm she had not known in years. She woke to sunlight streaming through her window. She ate meals that filled her belly. She walked the halls of the fortress, learning its secrets and its scars. And every evening, the king summoned her. At first, they spoke of small things, the weather, the fortress, the mountains. He asked her about her exile, but she gave him nothing. She asked him about his wounds, but he deflected with humor. They circled each other like wary wolves, each waiting for the other to strike first. Then, one night, he asked her a different question. "Do you believe in the goddess?" Alara looked up from the fire. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one." She considered for a long moment. "I used to, before they cast me out. And now?" "Now I think the goddess looks away when it's convenient." The king's expression darkened. "You're not wrong." Alara frowned. "You're a king. Aren't you supposed to defend her honor?" "I'm a man," he said quietly, "and I've seen too much to pretend the divine is always just." The words hung in the air, heavy and true. "What happened to you?" Alara asked. "In the forest. Who were those men?" His jaw tightened. "Traitors. Wolves from my own pack who decided I was no longer fit to lead." "Why?" "Because I refused to wage a war they believed we should win." He stared into the flames, his voice distant. "Because I chose mercy over bloodshed, because I am my father's son, and my father was a tyrant." Ilara's breath caught. "You're nothing like a tyrant." "No," he agreed. "But that doesn't mean I'm free of his shadow." She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to tell him that shadows could be outrun. But she stayed where she was, silent and still. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. "You already know it. Your soldiers told you." "I want to hear it from you." She hesitated, then softly, "Ilara." He repeated it, the syllables slow and deliberate on his tongue. "Ilara." It sounded different when he said it, like a prayer, like a promise. "And you?" she asked. "What do I call you?" He smiled faintly. "Most call me my lord, or your majesty. But you can call me Kyle." "Kyle," she whispered. The fire crackled, the night deepened, and something unspoken shifted between them. The attack came without warning. Ilara woke to the sound of screams and the clash of steel. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, and ran to the window. Below, the courtyard was chaos. Wolves snarling, soldiers shouting, fire spreading across the walls. She barely had time to process before her door burst open. A soldier stood in the doorway, bloodied and wild-eyed. "Come with me, now." "What's happening?" "The traitors are back. They've breached the gates." Ilara's stomach dropped. "Where's Kyle?" "Fighting! Now move!" He grabbed her arm and pulled her into the corridor. Around them, the fortress was alive with violence. Wolves prowled the halls, their eyes glowing with feral hunger. Soldiers fought back with swords and shields, but they were outnumbered. The soldier led her down a narrow staircase and into a hidden passage. "This leads to the eastern ridge. You'll be safe there." "I'm not leaving him." "You don't have a choice." Ilara wrenched her arm free. "I saved his life once. I'll do it again." Before the soldier could stop her, she ran. She followed the sounds of battle through the twisting corridors, her pulse roaring in her ears. She had no weapon, no plan, only instinct. She found Kale in the great hall. He was surrounded by 5 wolves, their fur matted with blood, their teeth bared. His sword was slick with gore, his movements precise despite his injuries. But he was tiring. She could see it in the way his shoulders sagged, the way his breathing came in ragged gasps. One of the wolves lunged. Kyle blocked the attack. But another came from the side, its jaws snapping toward his throat. Alara didn't think. She threw herself forward, her body colliding with the wolf mid-leap. They hit the ground hard, rolling across the stone. Pain exploded through her shoulder as teeth sank into her flesh. She screamed. Kyle roared. In an instant, he was there, his sword flashing. The wolf fell, lifeless. The others scattered, retreating into the shadows. Kyle dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he pressed them to her wound. "Alara, I'm fine," she gasped. "I'm fine. You're bleeding. So are you." He laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "You're insane." "Maybe." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world stilled. His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a streak of blood. "Why did you come back?" "Because," she whispered, "you're not alone anymore." Something in his expression cracked. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't deserve you. Good thing I'm not here for what you deserve." The moment shattered as footsteps echoed through the hall. Soldiers arrived, securing the area. Medics rushed forward, tending to the wounded. But Kale did not let go of her hand. Not then. Not for hours after. The fortress was quiet in the aftermath. The dead were burned. The wounded were healed. The traitors were driven into the mountains, scattered and broken. But the cost had been high. Alara sat in Kyle's chamber, her shoulder bandaged, her body aching. He sat across from her, his expression distant. "They'll come back," he said quietly. "They always do. Then we'll be ready." He looked at her, something raw and vulnerable in his gaze. "You keep saying we. Because that's what it is now, isn't it?" He was silent for a long time. Then slowly, he nodded. Alara leaned forward. "Tell me the truth. Why do they hate you so much?" Kyle's jaw tightened. "Because I refuse to be what they want me to be. Because I won't lead them into a war that will destroy us all. Because I believe strength is choosing mercy, even when it's hard." That doesn't sound weak to me. It does to them. He exhaled slowly. "My father was a conqueror. He built this kingdom on blood and fear. And when I took the throne, I tried to change it. I tried to make us something better." His voice broke. "But maybe I'm too late. Maybe the damage is already done." Alara stood and crossed the room. She knelt before him, taking his hands in hers. "It's not too late, not if you fight for it. And what if I fail? Then you fail trying." She squeezed his hands. "But you won't fail alone." Kyle stared at her, his eyes shining. Then, slowly, he brought her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he whispered. "You didn't do anything," Alara said. "You just saw me when no one else did. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen." The weeks that followed were filled with rebuilding. The fortress walls were repaired. The soldiers trained harder, and Alara found herself standing at Kyle's side more often than not. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer a guest. She was something else entirely. But the whispers followed her everywhere. Omega, exile, witch. The pack members did not trust her. They watched her with suspicion, their eyes narrowed, their lips pressed thin. One night, as she walked through the courtyard, a woman stepped into her path. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair and eyes like ice, a high-ranking wolf, a beta perhaps. "You don't belong here," the woman said. Ilara met her gaze. "That's not for you to decide. The king is making a mistake. You'll bring ruin to this pack." "Or maybe," Ilara said quietly, "I'll help save it." The woman's lip curled. "You're delusional." Ilara stepped closer, her voice low and steady. "I survived exile. I survived rejection. I survived the cold and the hunger and the dark. So if you think I'm afraid of you, you're the one who's delusional." The woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. But Ilara knew the confrontation was far from over. That night, Kale found her on the battlements. She stood at the edge, staring out at the mountains, the wind whipping her hair around her face. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. "I'm not afraid. I know." He stepped beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "But that doesn't mean I don't worry." Ilara glanced at him. "Your pack hates me. Some of them, not all." "Enough." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you regret staying?" She considered the question. "No. Do you regret asking me to?" "Never." They stood in silence, the night vast and endless around them. "What happens now?" Ilara asked. Kyle turned to face her, his expression serious. "Now we prepare. The traitors won't stop, and neither will I." "Then neither will I." He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. "You're the strongest person I've ever met." Ilara's breath hitched. "I'm not—" "Yes," he said firmly, "you are." And then slowly, carefully, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, questioning, but when she kissed him back, it deepened, became something fierce and desperate and real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kale rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know what the future holds," he whispered, "but I know I want you in it." "Then I'm not going anywhere," Ilara said. And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. The revelation came without warning. Ilara stood in the fortress library, poring over ancient texts about the goddess and her gifts. Kale had suggested she research her abilities, the strange warmth that had saved his life, the way her touch seemed to heal wounds that should have been fatal. She found the answer in a book bound in black leather, its pages yellowed with age. The Pathfinders. They were rare. Omegas blessed by the goddess with the ability to sense destiny, to heal not just bodies but souls. They were said to appear only in times of great need, when the balance between mercy and destruction hung by a thread. Ilara's hands trembled as she read. Everything made sense now. The way her wolf had stirred when she touched Kyle, the warmth in her palms, the strange pull she felt toward him. She was a pathfinder, and according to the text, pathfinders were bound to alphas by fate itself. The door opened behind her. She turned to find Kale standing in the doorway, his expression curious. "Find anything?" he asked. She held up the book. "I found everything." He crossed the room and read over her shoulder. His eyes widened. "Ilara?" "I'm a pathfinder," she said quietly. "And you're the alpha I'm meant to guide." Kale stared at her, the weight of the revelation settling between them. "That's why you saved me." "No," Ilara said firmly. "I saved you because I chose to. Fate had nothing to do with it." He smiled faintly. "Always defiant. Always." But the truth was undeniable. They were bound, not by chains, but by something deeper, something neither of them could escape. And Alara wasn't sure if that terrified her or gave her hope. That night, the traitors returned. They came with fire and fury, a horde of wolves bent on destroying everything Knelt had built. The battle was brutal, the casualties high. Alara fought alongside the soldiers, her instincts sharp despite her lack of training. She could feel the bond between her and Knelt thrumming like a living thing, guiding her movements, keeping her alive. And when she saw him cornered by 3 wolves, their jaws snapping, she didn't hesitate. She ran toward him, her hands glowing with the same warmth that had saved his life once before. She touched the nearest wolf, and it collapsed, convulsing. The others backed away, snarling. Knelt stared at her, awe and fear mingling in his eyes. "What did you do?" "What I was meant to," Alara said. The battle ended at dawn. The traitors fled, their ranks decimated. The fortress stood, battered but unbroken. And in the aftermath, as the sun rose over the mountains, Knelt took Alara's hand and led her to the center of the courtyard. The pack gathered around them, silent and watchful. Knelt's voice rang out, strong and clear. "This woman saved my life. She saved this fortress. She saved all of you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "And now," Knelt said, his gaze locked on Alara, "I ask her to stand beside me, not as a subject, not as a guest, but as my equal." He knelt before her. The crowd gasped. Alara's heart stopped. "Knelt, will you stay?" he asked. "Not because fate demands it, but because you choose it." Tears stung her eyes. She looked down at him, this broken, beautiful man who had seen her when no one else had. "Yes," she whispered, "I choose you." He rose and kissed her, and the pack erupted in cheers. The months that followed were not easy. There were still whispers, still doubts. But Alara faced them all with her head held high. She was no longer an exile, no longer invisible. She was the pathfinder, the king's chosen, the woman who had saved a kingdom. And she wore that truth like armor. On a cold winter night, Knelt led her to the highest tower of the fortress. The moon hung full and bright above them, casting silver light over the mountains. "I brought you something," he said. He held out a small box. Inside was a silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. "It belonged to my mother," Knelt said quietly. "She was the last pathfinder before you." Ilara's breath caught. "Knelt." "She would have loved you," he said, "almost as much as I do." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too." He fastened the pendant around her neck, then pulled her into his arms. They stood together beneath the moon, 2 souls bound by choice and fate and something stronger than both. "What happens now?" Alara asked. Knelt smiled. "Now we build something better, together." And as the snow began to fall, soft and silent, Alara knew he was right. They had both been broken, both been cast out, but together they had become whole. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.